Scene a Story Part 2. Now, if you're not aware what Scene a Story is, it's basically making everything in storytelling compacted into one video in certain aspects and certain points in your novella, in your writing period. And basically, last episode we went over, at least on Scene a Story Part 1, we went over the first paragraph of your novel. Now we are going over the first chapter. All right. Now, hear me out. It's gonna be a long one, but stay tuned. I promise we'll get some juicy details and help you write the best first novel that you possibly can. Let's begin. Hello, friends. Whether you come from comment sections to emails to recommendation pages. Hello, my name is Ryan, the author, and this is A Path in the Pen. Whether it's your first time here or you're a recurring character in this place I like calling my narrative, my community, pleasure to see you here today. I can't stress that enough. And let's begin, right? Get right into it. So, whenever you write a first chapter, here's one common understanding. Here's your little memo that you have to get through your skull is your reader is supposed to think, not supposed to think, I understand everything or I understand a lot, right? They need to believe at their first chapter that I need to understand, because first chapter is about bringing intrigue and some world building knowledge, especially if we look at, your story or whatever. Let's just do some common questions, right? Where does your story take place? Does it take place on Earth, Mars, Pluto, for all I care? A new world? Where does it take place? And we don't describe how the politics are or how the society is. You make it look through the reader's action. I mean, the character's actions. Character's actions and how they think and process is how you can really get character depth and also world-building information in just one sentence. And people don't understand the problem and the dilemma that every single scene, every single line is adding depth to your character in some way. And some people don't believe that, and then they have flat arcs for characters. I'm not saying get hip, but I'm not saying get onto yourself like crazy. That normally does more harm than good, but I'm just saying, you gotta, whenever you're writing your first chapter, the first chapter is one of the most important things ever, because you can have a terrible second chapter. But if you have a great first chapter, that at least buys you some time as for your readers to then go at least to like chapter 3 or 4, right? And then you have to, keep on bringing them in, it's just leaving breadcrumbs, right? So they pick up the breadcrumbs. It's simple, right? In theory. But you just have so much stuff to introduce, right? You have so many of these thoughts going through your mind. How am I going to introduce this, and then the characters and his backstory, her backstory, whatever. And how do I introduce, maybe this world building detail that really shapes my world? And when I think of the best world building ways of doing it, it's the natural way, right? And we'll get back on, some of the stuff later, but absolutely make sure that everything that you write, whenever you're revealing, is using a plot point or something, right? And that situation actually calls for it, right? So you can go into introspection, you can go into thoughts, you can go into all this during like some scene, but if the scene isn't calling for you, just because it's the first chapter does not mean you are allowed to do world building, because then the reader feels like you're pushing it onto them. No, you have to ease them into it, right? It's a trick them, okay? Here you go. We're going to give you this, but we're actually feeding you some information, so you better remember. That's basically the mindset, right? Because you also have to know your characters, how your characters are going to think and reveal this information, whether it's from dialogue or whether it's from character thought. And character thought always shows up. You can have a sarcastic person. I've always found sarcastic people as, in perspectives to be easier to reveal world building information, because they're just so, especially like a blunt sarcastic person, like one of my main characters, Bosse. He's just sarcastic and blunt or whatever. So, yeah, he'll just go like, oh, yeah, and like something Bosse would say is, why can't they sign a treaty already? And what does that tell you, right? That tells you already that there's been a war going on there's at least been a war going on or some conflict, right? And it gives enough information while giving this reader intrigue into what the conflict is. And that's how you bring immersion to your writing. But also, I have to just say this is, yeah, I've said this earlier. Make sure the scene calls for what you're bringing up. So let's just say you have a magic system for, I don't know, let's just make something random, right? Like pictures, right? No, that's actually a good idea. I'm going to keep that to myself. With lights or whatever, there's light magic, so you're able to take it out of, the light bulb. How do you say that without, saying, oh yeah, you take it out of the light bulb? No, you make a scene that shows that. So it's kind of like using, right, show not tell, right? You show, you don't tell. You bring up occurrences that can naturally phase its way into world building knowledge, and it also gives this lived in feeling. Because whenever this is the next point, is just the lived in feeling. But anyway, whenever you have these scenes or whatever, and you're trying to, grasp it, and you feel like it's not working, it's because you're not showing. You're not showing. You're telling. You're telling me about, a tragic backstory about how the cousin died from a bomb explosion, whatever, right? And, the cousin was, their best friend because they didn't have any friends, and, blah, 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 blah. List goes on, right? You can make a million scenarios, infinite amount of scenarios for that same thing, but it's how you reveal it, right? You could say, let's say it's first person perspective. Just say they get something in the plot occurs to show, and it brings up a memory, and you just say, miss them in first person. Or, like, looks just like the scarf, looks just like the scarf they used to wear. And now they're wondering, and you could even, like, go into, we could even go into, like, even more detail and put, in they, you have to put that in italics, right? You can put that in italics, and so the reader's like, who's they? And it builds intrigue while also showing backstory. And it gives, like we said, which I'm moving on right now, is the lived-in feeling. The lived-in feeling in a story is just the most complex thing to understand and to do. Because lived-in, you have to know your characters and what they know about the world. So then you're not accidentally info dumping, right? You have to give exposition in a more natural way. And yeah, I mean, first chapter is all about introducing your world, your characters, even teasing the conflict and showing the conflict, and bringing contradictions into your world. So you give a center belief at the beginning of the chapter, and at the end of the chapter, then something gets thrown, and everyone's head gets thrown off, right? That's like something happens, right, to contradict what everyone was thinking, and it can really bring that immersion level up, so you can have more time to buy your reader's time. But I'm not saying for your second chapter that you're just gonna go full info dump because you should be immersed. No, whatever. But just make it feel lived in, because you have to realize that the story started prior. Supposedly, the world was there prior to the story starting. So there had to be some stuff. So whenever you go over a magic system, you have to talk in the character's perspective as if they already know what's happening. And so you give brief details or whatever, like just enough, so then they start understanding the magic system. Or, you could go like the really cool route. And, I respect people who do this, but they find a book on magic and they start reading it. But if they already know it, I feel like they would skim through that realistically. So, unless I would say for new information or whatever, especially for like magics, and if there's books for it or whatever in your world, then you can literally summarize it. You can say the book read about how this did this and then this, or you could literally just go like word from word, put it in a different font for the writing. So accumulate that feeling of just of that different font. It gets readers' attention basically, but you have to make sure that everything in the first chapter has to feel lived in, because it's so difficult on first chapters. It gets hit so much times because on the second chapter you already are giving this lived in feeling because you already had a first chapter. For chapter 1, you didn't have anything else before this. Well, anything that the reader doesn't know already, right? Unless you had a prologue or something, whatever. And you just have to realize that I said this before. I said this at the beginning of the video. I can't believe it's like almost 11 minutes already. But you have to remember that the goal is not to I understand a lot of stuff about the world now. It's I need to understand more stuff about the world, because you give I've said this many times, you give just enough information about everything. You introduce the conflict, you introduce the flaws of your characters, and you can foreshadow the flaws of your characters and how that can either be their downfall, demise, or how they can improve from there. So then you actually set up a great character arc and set up good thematic presence and set up good storytelling elements being used at the same time simultaneously. And you get to have this feeling of, this quenched thirst of, okay, we can work with this. And first chapters there's more stuff, I'm trying to think of what it was. I absolutely hate when people if you pick Earth, okay, let's say we have Earth, and there's been great novels that have it's just normal Earth, it's just normal LA. But especially, normally it's like LA or New York or something, I don't know, or some, country's town, I swear. But you just have to make sure that the Earth's a bit different than the one we currently live in, but not through like the normal stuff. So you can give you give stuff that feels familiar. So let's just say like, I don't know, a war. Let's say a war's going on the Earth that you made. A soldier's doubting their orders. That's how you bring familiarity, or a teenager sneaking out, mother tucking in her child, a mother cradling her child, a mother comforting, parents comforting, whatever. Right? You bring up familiar stuff by using. I feel like the best stuff to use for familiar stuff is either with emotions of love attached to them that are in our world, or definitely, hatred is familiarity, right? Grief. That's how you hit the feels of the reader, but you can really use any emotion attachment with that familiarity, and you can write pretty well. And yeah, I think I already went over most of the stuff I wanted to go over, besides, yeah, I said this before, give a taste of the action a bit, right? There has to be something that you can at least feel the grittiness or whatever's going to happen or whatever, especially if it's some action-packed book, or, if it's romance or whatever, and then you give a friction of connection, because you don't want or you just make, the book they don't even look at each other for the entire chapter, and then people are just like, oh, it's one of those books, I'm gonna read it. I don't read that much romance, so I don't really know much about romance, like as a main plot point, but I know enough, I guess, read enough subplot romances. And it's just, let's just go over what you shouldn't do. Like, let's just make sure we went over the checklist on what we shouldn't do when you're writing your first chapter. And it starts with, don't make the story feel brand new, right? It feels brand new in the sense of new world, new this, new that, but it shouldn't it should feel lived in. It should not be, all brand new information, right? Because your characters lived in this world their entire life. Why would they not know what the magic system is? What they don't know what the sword is, or why are they thinking in their mind about this war that's been happening, right? Because you didn't bring up stuff that would bring it up. And so you bring it up more naturally. And, a great example of this, I read someone's work or whatever, shout out to them. But I think they introduced, I think it was 4 kingdoms, right? And how they introduced them, they could have just erased all that introduction and give that introduction whatever the character said that they were from, because there are 4 characters from 4 different kingdoms, right? So how you do that is just you introduce the kingdoms because they went over the kingdoms' names or whatever. But then what I'd recommend is just whenever the character gets introduced as, oh yeah, I'm from this kingdom, then that person starts thinking of that kingdom, because your character's mind isn't going to go from, panic or, calculation to let me think about the world building details that I need to say, and instead make a scene that, does those things automatically. And yeah, I mean, you also got to make sure that, your prose has to be on point, and your characters have to be on point on how you want them to be like. But first chapter establishes a lot of stuff. It establishes world building, characters, thematic presence. It establishes, the conflict a little bit, but it's all a little bit of information here and there. And then you can give a lot of information if you want, and then but make sure that there's still intrigue at the end of it. You're not just saying end of story, that's all that's it for there, because then the reader might forget it, and then they're gonna be like, wait, what was this, when did this happen? And you're like, page 1, and they're just staring at you like, what? You mentioned it once. And that's one thing you also have to realize about things, is that just because you introduce them in chapter 1 does not mean you're not going to have to introduce them later on to remind the reader and to bring about examples of this thing colliding, or examples of this information happening and being given out repeatedly. Of course, don't make it every single page. The war's happening. The war's happening. Flip the page. The war's happening. The war's happening. Then the reader's going to be like, okay, I think I know the war's happening right now. But everything's just about subtlety in writing. I recommend, if you are searching for descriptions, definitely the best thing to do for descriptions is look at Tolkien. Tolkien has some of the best simple prose I've ever seen. How he went from one sentence and described something so clear. I forgot what it was. I think it was in the forest, in The Hobbit, the Elven Forest. The way he described just like some normal thing, and I was able to see it perfectly. That's the way you're able to do it. And being able to envision, or, make sure to use also the 5 senses, but don't force the 5 senses. Like, don't just say, like, the oak tasted like wood on my tongue. You don't say that, okay? Because someone's gonna unless your character eats bark, they do not need to say that, right? Okay, so just saying, right? Because taste, you don't only get taste, you get smell a lot. At least in my story. You get sight, you get hearing, you get all these. Make sure just to use all the 5 senses. You'll be fine. And you can always improve later. That's always what I'll say, is you can always improve later. And remember, just always make sure to have this kind of, tension built up. And, you're fine to disagree with me. I respond to all comments, by the way, since we're wrapping this thing up. I respond to all comments, so if you have a claim that you think something's different, then we can talk about it, and I could learn something, you could learn something. It's kind of like a win-win situation. All it takes is just a couple of minutes to write down your message, and I will spend probably 4 times as long making an essay if there are questions or concerns about that, because I love my community. I love making videos for everyone. I love helping everyone out. And I think I'm giving good information. At least that's what I've heard from viewers. And yeah, I'm trying my best here. So I'll let y'all go. My name is Ronnie Author. This is The Path and the Pen. And yeah, if you're interested in buying my novel, it is releasing December 18th of this 2025 year. And it's going to be called Hellborn Beginning or the End. And if you don't mind, we're going to stop right here. And I'm going to go in my narrator voice and we're going to go over book blurb. I gotta find it. 1 second. Loss is the heirloom of war, passed down and down the totem pole. The Javer War, Gratians versus Dovians, has dragged on for half a century and is no different. A war where threats are not empty, where funerals are free, yet plentiful, and where last names are considered curses in one place, but hope in another. 3 Dovians fight despite the world meant to break them. One sleeps because that is the only way to see what was lost one more time. One buries himself beneath the weight of his father's name. One seeks peace in a world that only offers blood. Are the lucky the ones who left the world early, or the ones who still remain? If you're interested in buying or purchasing, reading, let me know. And if you have any questions, concerns about my novel, Hellborn Beginning or the End, then let me know. I'd be happy to answer anything. You can literally ask me anything in the comments, and I'll probably answer it. Like, don't be shy. Thank y'all so much. I think if I'm going to have to check my subscriber count, but let me check this real quick. We're at 157 subscribers on 70 videos published, 71 by the time one for this video is uploaded. But it's just crazy how big this channel's gotten and how much I've loved. I thought I had conflicted feelings starting this, and there are some downsides, right? But I really love the upsides, so I'm still gonna post. I'm still gonna bring about writing advice videos weekly. I'm sorry this is late. Editing has been hectic for my last edit for my novel, and yeah, I'm just trying to get done with that. And I hope y'all have a great night, day, evening, afternoon, noon, whatever. Because you only live once. Keep writing, keep being you, be comfortable in your own skin. My name is Ronnie Author. This is The Path and the Pen. I'm signing out. Y'all take care.